Well, Senator, just to start off, thank you so much for being with us and spending time and taking time out of your very busy day. To start off, let's just get right into it. Your accomplishments, obviously, healthcare is a huge focus for you, including passing multiple funding increases for the NIH. Why have you had such a large focus during your time in office on mental health care?
Well, both mental health and just healthcare research generally. When I started chairing the committee 8 years ago that funds all the healthcare programs, but the discretionary funding in healthcare research, there hadn't been an increase for a dozen years, not even an inflationary increase. So essentially their research buying power was about 22% lower than it had been a decade earlier. And at a time like this, when so much is happening in healthcare, we understand the human genome, we're beginning to think about ways to intervene earlier and prevent things from happening. To not make healthcare a priority, healthcare research a priority, would have been a big mistake. And we've done that. I know one of the areas you've been interested in is Alzheimer's. That account went from $600 million a year to a little over $3 billion a year over that 8-year period of time, and it's making a big difference in looking at that. And then on the mental health front, Senator Stabenow and I have worked together. She's a Democrat from Michigan. We were in the House together, now in the Senate together, but starting in 2013 to really try to bring some future optimism to what can happen in mental health. We went to the Senate floor the last of October 2013, which was the 50th anniversary of the last bill President Kennedy signed. And we sort of went through that bill, which essentially imagined two things. One is closing the big institutional facilities that were not serving their patients as well as they might have. And the second was replacing that with certified quality local mental health facilities where people could still be in a community and have the kind of mental health help they needed. And you know, the country did a great job in the 70s and early 80s of closing those facilities. They didn't do a good job of providing the alternative. And so homelessness, addiction, lots of other things that might have been prevented if we'd have had a better healthcare, a mental health care structure would have made a big difference. And so we started with 8 pilot states. Missouri was one of them, looking at what happens if you treat mental health like all other health. And in the public safety bill that passed after what happened in Uvalde, Texas, the biggest single element of that bill was taking our model, which was clearly working, and allowing over the next decade all 50 states to have a 4-year effort to look at that model and see if they didn't want to make that part of their permanent structure. And I think they will. I think it's a big step forward. You could argue, and I would argue, it's 59 years later than it should be. But here we are 6 decades later, finally doing what the country said they were going to do in 1963.
And I know a lot of people in our country say our country is more divisive than ever, yet you've been able to work across the aisle, just like you mentioned, on many projects and bills, including the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the Victims of Child Abuse Act, and Excellence in Mental Health Act. So how have you been able to successfully do so when it sometimes seems like it's impossible for both sides to get along?
Well, you know, I think the essence of democracy is finding out what's possible to do in the country you're part of and the government you're part of. I think one of the big challenges of the last decade or so were so many people running for office saying, if I don't get exactly what I want, I won't settle for anything else. That's antithetical to democracy, and frankly, it's antithetical to anything. If you have that view, whether you're at home or at church or at work, you're almost never going to get much accomplished. And you know, democracy just doesn't work that way. You don't get exactly what you want, and the way you advance the country is to find people to work with and get as much as you want as is possible to get. That's sort of the balance of democracy, and whether it's working with Senator Coons on every time we need to extending the Victims of Child Abuse Act, or Senator Stabenow on mental health, or Senator Van Hollen on seeing that people who didn't get the recognition they needed because of their race in World War I got a posthumous recognition of what they'd done going back through those records, or what we've been able to do to work together to have the National Geospatial Site, creating that new facility in St. Louis, or moving almost all of the ag research jobs from Washington, D.C., 573 jobs, to Kansas City, Missouri. And that meant working with Congressman Cleaver as well as the senators and reps from Kansas to get that done. It's just what it takes, I think, to get things done. And I think we've done things that advanced the country and advanced our state in that effort.
And throughout your time in Congress, what legislation are you most proud of being a part of?
Well, I do think the legislation we just passed on mental health has the most far-reaching impact. But what's happening at the National Institute of Health and the research legislation there, moving those jobs and facilities to our state, critically important. The legislation we've passed to try to address the opioid crisis or health, mental health in schools. All of those are things that have real long-term ramifications for the country. And you know, on the mental health side at schools, pandemic had a big impact on not just learning loss, but also emotional stability for lots of people. And juvenile mental health, pediatric mental health are areas where we need to do things to encourage providers. You know, another bill that I was able to help get passed was a bill we passed that the University of Missouri has been one of the first major recipients of, to do more training in a way that focuses future healthcare providers on rural America and parts of our country that don't have the level of healthcare that they'd like to have. And so training people with that in mind and rewarding them when they decide to make that decision about rural health providers. Our efforts in broadband in our state, I've been very involved in that as a member of the Commerce Committee in both the House and Senate. And certainly we saw in the last year the impact it has when people have to work at home, go to school from home, go to the doctor from home. The importance of being connected in ways that now you can only be connected if you have high-speed broadband, really important, and we're trying to do everything we can to see that our state catches up and gets to where we need to be there.
And definitely, obviously, a lot of accomplishments in your time. Kind of switching over to more balance of powers now and the midterms. Obviously, you're no longer running, your seat is up. How do you see the U.S. Senate looking after the midterms?
Well, I think the Senate's going to be narrowly divided, and you know, one of the things you'll be looking at and the whole country will be looking at a month from now is what's happened with a likely shift in the House to Republicans. Probably a 50-50 chance that Republicans may also control the Senate, but we know that President Biden's going to be there, so you're going to have a divided government. But we haven't had a divided government for the last 2 years, and I think inflation and energy policy that doesn't work have really cost American families and the American economy in a significant way. So we'll see what happens. There are not going to be big majorities in either the House or the Senate. President Biden, when he was running, wanted to talk constantly about the ability to work together. I think this will create an environment where some of those working together skills will be used in a way that they clearly haven't been used the first 2 years, when one side was committed to take everything you could do with 50 votes and the vice president and make those changes. And you know, 50 votes in the vice president's probably never a very good idea, and it's certainly not an idea to use over and over again to head the country in a direction that you clearly don't have the mandate to head the country that way.
And how do you see the midterms playing out here in Missouri? Does Eric Schmitt have your full support?
He does, and you know, all the polling I see indicates that Eric Schmitt has been elected now to 2 different statewide offices. The state treasurer's office, the attorney general's office, is somebody that Missourians have voted for before. I think they'll vote for him by big numbers again this year, and I look forward to seeing what he can do for our state as a member of the Senate.
And kind of going on, obviously, former President Donald Trump has had a lot of influence. He's still influencing the midterm elections. At this point, do you think an endorsement or possible presidential run by him would help or hurt the Republican Party?
Well, I mean, we'll have to see what happens after this election. I fully expect President Trump to announce he's running for president again. We'll see how that goes. You know, after you've been president and thinking about doing that again, who knows how that'll feel to him when he gets out there and makes that announcement. I expect that announcement to happen, but I think where people need to be focused right now is what happens in this election year. Looking at what's happened in the last 2 years, you know, inflation, there's a new inflation number out today, and since President Biden was sworn in, prices have increased. The inflation number is 13.5% in less than 2 years. That's a pretty big increase every time people go to the grocery store or get their car filled up with gas or pay their electric bill, and I think the American people are and should be concerned about that. And they're going to be very focused, I think, on that issue as well as the border and public safety when they vote in November.
There's definitely a lot of hot topics for this midterm election. And I would say, kind of wrapping up a little bit, over nearly the past 4 decades, you have been involved, obviously, in the political realm. What would you like your legacy to be?
Well, I think fortunately, I think there's a lot to look at. I do think, as I've said before, the legacy of health research is going to change the way people live. It's going to change the opportunities that people have, create some chances that people can be healthy longer and be both mentally and physically healthy longer, not just the normal mental health problems, but even the Alzheimer's and dementia problems that I think I've been able to be involved in moving forward there. The National Institute of Health named a building for me that's their new Alzheimer's research facility early this year. That's something they haven't done for 21 years, name a building after any member of Congress. And that's important, but you know, here today in Sullivan County, we're dedicating this reservoir that's going to provide water for 11 counties here in northwest Missouri, in north central Missouri. And you know, that's very forward-looking on the part of these communities. I'm glad we could work with them on that. The Next Gen research facility at the University of Missouri, I think, is going to make a big difference to the university's ability to compete for grants. It's been a leader in our state with health research for a long time. I think this elevates the university to a different level. Food and world food demand is going to be a significant challenge in the near future. Seeing all those ag research jobs move to Kansas City while I was in the Senate, seeing what's happening with the Danforth Plant Science Center and the ag research at the University of Missouri puts us again in a really good place as we look at a world where world food demand is going to double between 2010 and 2060. I think it's been an exciting time to be able to serve. I've loved the opportunity to do it. I'm grateful to Missourians that they've given me so many different ways to serve as a county official, as a state official, as a member of the Congress, House, and Senate, and I'm grateful.
And I know you started off as a history teacher very on in your early career. Did you ever think you'd be here?
Well, there'd be no reason to particularly think I'd be here, but I never thought I wouldn't be here. I was always optimistic about the opportunities in the country, and I wouldn't say I ever had a plan to wind up with the opportunities I've had. But you know, I think this is a country where people are optimistic and forward-looking, and that was the way I was raised. You know, small-town America is a great place to create a sense that everything is possible. And my mom and dad were dairy farmers, first person in my family to graduate from college, and incredibly lucky.
And your time in office comes to an end in just a few months on January 3rd. So what are your plans for January 4th?
Well, I really don't have any plans for January 4th. I like to work, and I intend to continue to work in some way, but I've tried to really do everything I could to stay focused on this job right up until the last minute. I think we've accomplished not only a lot in the 26 years I've been in the Congress, but a lot in, say, the last 26 months or so, a time when we knew I wasn't running again. I announced in March of 2021 I wasn't running again, but I said that day I wanted to finish strong. And I'm doing my best to do that. You know, I've been in this week I've been in about 20 Missouri counties doing what I've done for a long time, and I did it because I liked it, because I was grateful to have the work, and I felt I understood it better if I was out there with Missourians as often as I could be.
And just speaking of Missouri, what is your hope for Missouri after the midterm elections? Got a couple turn of seats possibly. What's your hope for Missouri in the political realm after this?
Well, you know, I haven't thought a whole lot about my hope for Missouri politically, but I do think Missouri is incredibly well positioned for the challenges and opportunities of the future. The whole location science and data elements that are coming together now that have so much impact on the things we do, the investment that the federal government's making in the geospatial facility, and a lot of companies that are in that satellite world of measuring weather, crops, everything else, autonomous vehicles. There's no reason that Missouri couldn't become an important, the center really of that growing part of our economy. What's going to happen in world food demand and the plant science and research areas. Where we're located is really an advantage for us, you know, where we can bring river and rail and highways all together to make us more competitive than we would be if we were located anywhere else. I think it's a great time of opportunity for our state. We just need to be sure we're grabbing that opportunity and making the most of what we have rather than just trying to get by with what we have.
And I would say, is there anything else that you would like to touch on?
I don't think so. I think we've got to get out and go to this other event, and I'm glad you came up today.
Of course.
Nice to spend time with you.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Let me ask a couple fun ones, just real quick. What's your favorite memory from DC?
Oh.
Well, you know, probably whether favorite or not, I chaired the last two inaugurations, and that's a real job. It starts in about June of the year before the January 20th election. I don't know that anybody's had a chance. The chairman really does, in a daily way, run that operation, from talking about the security needs to the other needs. Very few people have got to chair two of them, and certainly two pretty different individuals with President Trump and President Biden, and two very different circumstances. We had one inauguration that 225,000 people with a ticket with my name on it went through the security process and had to be ticketed, and we had to worry about all of those things. The second one, we had 1,900 people. We were still outside in the same place, but 1,900 people instead of 225,000, and a whole different set of concerns and things to worry about. So I've loved the chance to do those things, and you know, the opportunities, particularly in the Bush administration, to be at the White House every week as one of the House leaders when we really did have a strategy that we tried to put legislation on the president's desk that would make a difference for the future of the country, and I think we did.
Who are you going to miss the most in D.C.?
What?
Who are you going to miss the most in D.C.?
You know, I have a lot of friends on both sides of the aisle, and I will miss them, but I haven't really had a single moment in the time since I announced I wasn't running again that didn't seem like to me that this was a good time to end this chapter and move on to the next one.